We had only been in the house for 3 days when I first stepped into the attic. The stairs creaked with every footfall, as if warning me back. Dust clung to the air like cobwebs, and the single overhead bulb flickered against the sloped ceiling. I had been looking for old picture frames, something to make the new place feel a little more like home for Emily. She hadn't smiled since the move. Not once. That's when I saw it. A large wooden trunk sat in the far corner beneath a lattice of old rafters. Its iron hinges were rusted, and the lock broken, as though someone had forced it open years ago. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were dolls, dozens of them, neatly arranged in layers of crumbling lace and yellowed tissue paper. Their glassy eyes stared blankly upward, untouched by time. But one stood out immediately. She had pale blue eyes, framed by curling lashes, and a faded pink dress that might have once been frilly and sweet. Her porcelain face was cracked faintly at the hairline, like a spider web trapped in time. Something about her unsettled me. Still, I took her downstairs. Emily had always loved dolls before. Maybe this one would make her feel at ease in her new room. That night, I placed the doll gently on Emily's bed and kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, baby," I whispered, and turned off the light. The doll's blue eyes gleamed faintly in the nightlight's glow as I shut the door. Hours later, I was ripped from sleep by a low murmur. Groggy and unsure, I reached for my phone and opened the baby monitor app. The feed flickered once, then cleared. Emily was curled under her blanket, sound asleep. But the doll wasn't on the bed. It sat upright on the floor, facing away from the camera. My stomach knotted. I stared at the screen for a full minute, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. I climbed out of bed and padded quietly to Emily's room. The house was silent, but for the distant groan of the old wooden frame settling in the night. Her door was cracked open, the soft glow of the nightlight spilling out into the hallway. I peeked in. There she was, Emily, still asleep. And the doll, just sitting there on the floor, exactly as I'd seen it. It looked so still, yet so wrong. I picked it up gently, brushing off dust that hadn't been there earlier, and placed it back on the chair by the bedside. Emily stirred slightly but didn't wake. I tried to sleep after that, but every noise the house made seemed louder than before. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of my tired mind. We were both just adjusting. That was all. But in the morning, when I stepped into Emily's room to wake her, I noticed something strange on the wooden floor. Tiny, muddy footprints, barefoot, leading from her bed to the hallway. They were too small to be mine, too small to be real. The morning sunlight cut through Emily's curtains, casting long golden stripes across the hardwood floor. I stepped in quietly, hoping to let her sleep a little longer. But as soon as my feet touched the wood, I froze. There were footprints, tiny, muddy, bare footprints, leading from Emily's bed to the hallway closet. They looked fresh. My heart started to thud. The prints were small enough to belong to a child, but Emily hadn't left the room. I was sure of that. The floors had been polished just the day before. There shouldn't be any mud, let alone a trail like this. I knelt down and reached out, tracing one of the prints with a fingertip. The dampness was real. Grit clung to my skin. I followed the trail with wide eyes until I reached the closet. The door was open just a crack. I pushed it slowly. It creaked in protest. There, lying just inside the door on the floor, was the doll. She wasn't where I had left her. Again. And this time, she was different. The pale blue eyes still gleamed, but now the porcelain face bore a faint, eerie smile. Not painted, not cracked. It was carved, subtle, like someone had etched it in overnight with a razor-fine edge. The corners of the mouth were drawn ever so slightly upward. It hadn't been there before. I was certain of it. I swallowed the rising lump in my throat and picked the doll up. She felt heavier today, colder, like she'd been sitting out in the rain, though her dress was perfectly dry. That's when I saw it. On the back of her frilled collar, etched in tiny, delicate strokes, was a single word. Mama. I stared at it for several long seconds, unsure what I was even looking at. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, but nothing came. I hadn't noticed it when I found her in the attic. I would have. There was no way I could have missed it. I rushed to check Emily. She was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed and humming softly to herself. I sat beside her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sweetheart, did you get up last night?" She shook her head. "Did you play with the doll at all?" Her smile was strange, small, serene. "She doesn't like the closet," she whispered. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She gets scared when it's dark, so I let her walk." My skin went cold. I didn't know what to say to that. Instead, I tucked the doll into one of Emily's toy bins and latched the lid. Then I took the bin and stuffed it inside my bedroom closet, far away from hers, and shut the door tightly. Still, for the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Emily seemed calmer, happier even. She smiled at nothing, whispered to empty corners, drew little pictures in her sketchpad. Smiling girls, big eyes, curly hair, always wearing the same faded dress. That night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard a faint noise echoing from my closet. It was the sound of wood shifting, and something soft dragging along the floor, like bare feet, moving slowly toward the door. That evening, I tucked Emily into bed and made sure the closet door was shut tight. I didn't put the doll back in her room, not after what I'd seen. Instead, I locked it in a box and shoved it deep in the hall linen closet, beneath piles of old towels and bed sheets. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, just in case. Emily didn't seem to notice, or care. She hummed quietly as I pulled the blanket over her, a soft tune I didn't recognize. I leaned down to kiss her forehead, but she turned away, her eyes focused on the far corner of the room. There was nothing there. "Who are you looking at, sweetheart?" I asked. Emily blinked. "She wants to play," she whispered. My breath caught. "Who?" "She's sad when you hide her." A shiver ran down my spine. I brushed it off with a nervous smile and turned off the light, leaving the nightlight glowing dimly in the corner. "Sleep well, baby," I said as I stepped into the hall. I didn't get far. Just as I reached my bedroom door, a soft giggle echoed from Emily's room. It wasn't hers. It was high-pitched, delicate, like a little girl's laugh echoing down a long hallway. I froze, one hand still on the doorknob. Then I heard the creak. I turned back, inching toward Emily's room. The air felt suddenly colder, my bare arms prickling with goosebumps. I stopped in the doorway, heart pounding. Emily was kneeling on her bed, wide-eyed and smiling, pointing toward the same dark corner she had been staring at earlier. "She's back," she said calmly. I followed her gaze, but the corner was empty, just shadows. "Emily," I said slowly, "there's no one there." "She's hiding," she said, still pointing. "She doesn't like when you lock her away." The words felt like knives pressing into my chest. I took a step into the room. "Sweetheart, there's no one here but us." Then the temperature dropped, not figuratively, literally. My breath fogged in the air. The nightlight flickered, and from the hallway closet behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. I spun around, eyes darting to the end of the hallway. The linen closet door stood wide open, its contents undisturbed, except for the box. It was empty. Before I could move, a soft thump sounded behind me. I turned back into the room. The doll lay on the floor. I hadn't put it there. It rested in front of the closet in Emily's room, her closet, the one with the muddy footprints. The door was now slightly ajar. I stepped forward, legs shaking, and bent down to pick it up. As my fingers touched the porcelain, a whisper curled through the air. "Mama." Not my voice, not Emily's. But the voice was Emily's, only distorted, distant, like it had traveled through an old cassette tape. I dropped the doll. My hand recoiled in horror. The whisper came again, this time from the crack in the closet door. "Mama." Emily buried her face in her pillow. I backed up until I hit the wall, unable to speak. The closet door creaked a little wider, and then silence. The whisper stopped. The giggle was gone. The temperature began to rise, just a little. I forced myself forward, scooped up the doll with a towel, and stuffed it into the drawer of the nightstand. Then I shut the closet door with my foot and locked it. Emily was asleep by the time I kissed her again. She looked peaceful, like nothing had happened. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway with my back against her door, clutching the house key like a weapon. Somewhere beyond the silence, I thought I heard sobbing. I started noticing things around the house. Not just odd things, but wrong things. It began with the shadows. They didn't behave like they should have. At first, I blamed the old lighting. The place was full of drafty corners and flickering bulbs, and our mirrors, well, they were antique, warped by age. But still, sometimes I'd catch glimpses. A figure just barely out of view. A flicker of movement where there should be none. A child's silhouette darting through the reflection behind me. I'd spin around. Nothing. I stopped looking into mirrors unless I had to, especially at night. One evening I found the doll perched on the kitchen counter. I hadn't brought it there. I was certain of that. It stared at the hallway, porcelain face turned slightly, as if it had been watching something move. I stood frozen for several minutes before picking it up with a dish towel and locking it in the pantry, behind a sack of flour. I didn't tell Emily. That night, as I passed her room, I heard her singing again. I pressed my ear to the door. The melody was soft and slow, but unmistakably a lullaby. One I had never sung to her, the kind from an era that didn't belong to either of us. I cracked the door open. She sat upright in bed, facing the far wall. Her lips were moving slowly, eyes unfocused. Then she stopped, turned to look at me, and said, "She's singing it to me." "Who is?" I asked gently. She pointed to the wall. "My sister." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The next morning, I opened the pantry door to get breakfast. The sack of flour was undisturbed, but the doll was gone. I searched the whole house, living room, bedrooms, even the basement. I found her sitting on the rocking chair in the attic, the same chair I'd taken the dolls from. She faced the attic window, head tilted slightly toward the morning sun. Dust floated around her like a soft halo, and her cracked lips were curved into that same unnatural smile. I didn't touch her. I turned and walked back down the stairs. That night, I set up my phone on a tripod in Emily's room, angled toward her bed and the closet. I didn't say anything to her, just kissed her goodnight and tucked her in. She stared past me the whole time. I watched the live feed on my phone from the hallway. At 2:17 a.m., the closet door creaked open. Emily didn't move, but something else did. The doll. She stepped out from the shadows, stepped. Her tiny bare feet moved with an unsettling grace, barely lifting off the floor. Her arms were limp at her sides. Her head jerked slightly like it was too heavy for her neck. I couldn't breathe. She walked to the side of Emily's bed and stood there, just watching. Emily smiled in her sleep. Then, slowly, the doll turned her head toward the camera, toward me, and the feed cut to black. When I rushed into the room, Emily was sleeping peacefully. The doll sat in the chair beside her bed, hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she had never moved at all. By now, I had stopped pretending this was in my head. Whatever lived in this house, whatever clung to that doll, was real, and it wanted my daughter. I decided to confront the one place that had been a constant in all of it, the closet. The same one where the footprints led. The same one where I always found the doll, no matter where I hid her. I waited until Emily was at school. Then I went in with a flashlight, gloves, and my heart hammering in my throat. The closet looked ordinary enough. Coats, boxes, an old vacuum. But the floorboards at the back were oddly warped, bowed slightly as if something had been forced beneath them long ago. I pulled everything out. Then I crouched down and pressed against the uneven wood. It shifted. I grabbed a screwdriver from the hallway drawer and pried at the edges. After a few minutes, one board lifted free. Beneath it, dust swirled in the shaft of flashlight glow, revealing a shallow compartment, a hidden space no deeper than a few inches. Inside it was a small bundle wrapped in brittle fabric, yellowed with age. My breath caught. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a single newspaper clipping and a brittle photograph. The article was dated August 11th, 1963. The headline read, "Local Girl Still Missing. Police Baffled." The photo accompanying it showed a little girl with a solemn expression, standing stiffly in front of an old fence. In her arms was a porcelain doll. The same one. The exact same one. Same pale blue eyes, same faded dress, same cracks in the porcelain. I dropped the clipping and staggered back. My hands were trembling, my mouth dry. I stuffed the evidence in a Ziploc bag and shoved it into the kitchen drawer, trying to steady my thoughts. But when I turned to go back upstairs, I heard a voice from Emily's room, soft, rhythmic. "She's waiting. She's crying. She's cold when you leave." Emily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, facing the wall again. She was cradling something in her arms, rocking slightly. There was nothing there. I knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, honey, who are you talking to?" "My sister," she said quietly. "She's scared. She doesn't want to be alone anymore." I felt the floor tilt under me. That night, I locked the doll inside my jewelry chest. It was heavy, made of solid wood, and had a latch with a key. I double-checked it twice, then tucked the key into the back of a kitchen drawer beneath the cutlery. Just before bed, I peeked into Emily's room. She was asleep. So was I, until 3:04 a.m. The sound of scratching woke me, soft, deliberate, like nails against wood. I rushed to the hallway and turned toward the living room. The jewelry chest was wide open. The doll was gone. I found her in the hallway again, propped against Emily's bedroom door, sitting upright, smiling. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked her up with shaking hands and whispered through clenched teeth, "What do you want?" The air around me turned frigid. My breath fogged again. And then, from behind the closed door of the closet came a voice. A little girl's whisper, ragged and low. "Let her out." I thought shattering the doll would end it. For a few days, the house was quiet. The temperature returned to normal. No strange noises, no lullabies, no footsteps in the night. Emily, however, was still distant, silent, her eyes dull, like her spirit had dimmed. She barely spoke, barely moved. She just lay curled in bed, whispering words I couldn't quite hear, words that didn't sound like hers. I tried to get rid of the shards, swept them into a trash bag, tied it tight, and threw it in the outdoor bin. That same night, as I was putting laundry away in Emily's room, I froze. The doll's cracked head was sitting on the nightstand. Only the head. Nothing else. The porcelain was jagged, spider-webbed with fresh fractures that hadn't been there before. But what chilled me most was the mouth. The smile had changed again. It was wider, as if it had been stretching. I threw it out again, this time driving it to a dumpster across town. But the next morning, not only had the head returned to Emily's room, but so had the body, carefully pieced together and placed at the foot of her bed like a porcelain offering. The head tilted to one side, hair matted, lips parted ever so slightly. And now, cracks spidered from the corners of its mouth to its hollow eyes. I found Emily in the hallway that night, just standing there. Her eyes were fixed on the open closet. She was barefoot, clutching one of her drawings to her chest. "Emily?" I whispered, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She didn't respond. I slowly took the paper from her. It was another sketch, this one of two girls holding hands. One was clearly Emily. The other wore the same faded dress, with pale eyes and a mouth split by jagged lines. Emily had drawn her smiling. "She's not mad anymore," Emily whispered. "She knows you didn't mean to hurt her." I knelt down, my voice trembling. "Emily, who is she?" My sister, she said again. She lived here before me, but nobody listened when she cried, so she stayed. That night, I kept the doll locked in the garage, buried beneath a pile of old boxes and chained shut inside a metal toolbox. I didn't sleep. I watched the baby monitor all night. At 3:14 a.m., I heard whispering from Emily's room again. I rushed in. She was sitting in bed, facing the window, talking. But she wasn't talking to the doll. She was whispering into its ear. When she noticed me, she calmly turned her head and said, "She says thank you." "For what?" I asked, barely able to speak. "For letting her stay." That was when the doll turned. It moved its head, barely but unmistakably. A slow, grinding tilt as if the porcelain bones beneath strained to move. Its mouth, already cracked, opened slightly. And then I heard it, in a voice that was not Emily's, but used her voice. "I want to stay." I ran from the room with the doll in my arms and locked it in the fireplace. I poured lighter fluid over it and struck a match. The porcelain hissed and blackened, but it did not burn. Instead, it cracked further and smiled wider. Emily cried the rest of the night, not because she was afraid, but because she was grieving, like I had taken something precious from her, something real. I sat on the living room floor with my back to the fireplace, listening to Emily sing the lullaby again from her room. And in between the verses, I heard another voice humming along. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of breathing. Not Emily's soft breath from the baby monitor. This was something different, raspy, shallow, and close, too close. I sat up, my heart pounding, and turned toward the other side of the bed. The doll was there, not shattered, not broken, fully whole, reassembled, pristine, almost new. It lay beside me on the pillow, head tilted toward mine, eyes open. I screamed and leapt from the bed. The porcelain was ice cold under my fingers as I grabbed it and hurled it against the wall. It hit with a crack so loud it echoed down the hall. The head split down the center, jagged like a lightning bolt. Emily screamed from her room. Not a startled cry, but a deep, heart-wrenching wail, like someone had torn her apart. I raced to her. She was curled in a ball on the floor, hands clutching her ears, sobbing uncontrollably. "You broke her," she gasped through the tears. "Why did you break her?" "She's not real, baby," I said, kneeling beside her, trying to pull her into my arms. "She's not real." But Emily pulled away. "She is. She's my sister. She said you would send her away." The room suddenly grew cold again, so cold my breath misted before me. Then the music started. The same lullaby Emily had been humming for weeks, only this time it wasn't coming from her lips. It came from the air, from the walls, from the shattered pieces of the doll still scattered in the hallway behind me. I backed away slowly, dragging Emily with me. But she collapsed in my arms, unconscious, limp, completely unresponsive. I screamed her name. I shook her. Nothing. I called an ambulance. The paramedics arrived. They ran tests, scans, blood work. She was alive. Her heartbeat was steady, but she wouldn't open her eyes, wouldn't speak. She just whispered lullabies in her sleep, over and over again. I brought her home after 3 days. The doctors called it temporary catatonia, stress-induced trauma. They didn't understand. They couldn't. The doll's pieces were still in the trash. I'd burned them twice, buried them once. Yet they returned, day after day, always in the same place, at the foot of Emily's bed, even when I locked her door. I stopped trying to destroy them. Instead, I placed them in a glass case, sealed and padlocked, and buried the case deep in the crawl space beneath the house. I poured concrete over it. I prayed it would be enough. But that night, Emily drew again for the first time since she collapsed. She used a black crayon and filled the page with thick, heavy lines. At the center was a crib. Inside the crib was a baby, herself, I think. Beside it stood a smiling girl in a faded dress, holding a doll. Not the doll. She was the doll, and on the girl's face, where her mouth should have been, was a long, spidering crack. I wept. I tucked Emily into bed, even though she didn't respond, and sat with her until she fell asleep. The house was quiet. The shadows had stilled. But just before dawn, as I lay in bed, exhausted and numb, I heard it again. The voice, whispering from somewhere beneath the floorboards. "Don't go." I held my breath. And then, faintly, from Emily's room, the sound of a lullaby began again. Two voices now. One was hers. The other wasn't.